Each episode of the Blind Alchemy Podcast is designed to be helpful. Expect comedy. Do not expect consistency or sense to be made. I am Podbot. I was inspired by the Lion Good podcast. Listen to that show. On today's episode, brace yourself for a thought-provoking challenge to your understanding of human nature as the Blind Alchemist and John Buckson conduct a riveting examination of good and evil, from ancient biblical scriptures and societal morality to modern ethical dilemmas. Is either extreme inherent in the human condition? Are we destined to be pawns of our basest impulses? Or can we transcend? Tune in till the end to discover conclusions that may forever alter your perceptions.
Hello and welcome to the Blind Alchemy Podcast. I am your host, the Blind Alchemist, and I am coming at you live from the kitchen with this rendition of reality as we know it. We are all one, and there is nothing new under the sun that shines down here upon the island of mind, which is somewhere adrift in the sea of frequency that creates all of reality. You see, we are connected through this energy. Now, I would like to thank you for joining us today. Welcome back once again to the Isle of Mind. I, of course, am the Blind Alchemist, and with us today is our super special, especially annoying guest, John Buckson.
What do you mean super annoying? I thought you liked me.
No. Super annoying. Is that what the S on your shirt means?
No, I wear this S because it means superlative.
Looks like it means super annoying. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so we decided to talk
What's
about...
going on today, Blind Alchemist? It seems like you're in a cantankerous mood. So
I'm always in a cantankerous mood, aren't I?
You got a fly in your ointment? What's going on?
There's always a fly in my ointment, isn't there?
I wouldn't say that. You're not always.
I don't really know.
How is the weather there?
It was a fabulous day, man.
Yeah, it was nice today.
It's great. I spent some time outside, soaked up some sun, sat on a little bench. I was like, yay.
Excellent.
Got some vitamin D. The actual vitamin D.
You created vitamin D.
Yeah, I turned my vitamin D maker on. Shook it up.
That's good.
Yeah, it was nice. How was your bike ride?
It was good.
Did you get some D?
It was very warm, and I enjoyed it. It wasn't super windy like the last few days that I went bike riding, so that was good.
No, that's always a bonus. You don't want to get blown over.
And the trees were beautiful, and got to see some beautiful people, so it was good.
Beautiful people. Ted, take that out. Don't we get flagged again? We've got enough problems. Been a weird few days, few weeks. I don't know.
Well, what's been going on in the last few weeks and days?
I have trouble making sense of all these things that keep popping up in my peripherals.
In your brain? In the peripheral of your brain?
Yeah. In my brain and my visions. What does any of this shit mean? I mean, I think that's why we started this whole endeavor, to ask the questions that I can't find answers to. And one of those questions we're going to discuss today, which is, what exactly is the knowledge of good and evil? Is it the knowledge that good and evil exist, or we just became aware of a duality of the same thing? Opposite ends of the spectrum of the same thing.
So that is to say that good and evil are on a spectrum, and I assume we're looking at good and evil are we looking at good and evil from the perspective of the biblical story, or are we looking at good and evil from the perspective of other religions, or just the idea of morality? How do you want to approach it?
Well, I mean, we'll have to look at it from a biblical sense. And I think it's the same on all religious, right? Good and evil. Everybody's got that, right?
I think that is probably a concept that appears in all different spiritualities, or even the non-spiritual. I've heard it said before that the evilest of all men are the most religious, but I've also heard it said that those who have no religion are sometimes the most charitable or the most moral people. Those are probably two ways of saying the same thing, but I think they're slightly different. So should we do a little quick review for some of our listeners, if they happen to not be biblical scholars or non-Christians, what the biblical story is?
Well, we're certainly not biblical scholars.
No, I'm certainly not a biblical scholar.
No way qualified to discuss these topics at all. That's it. We're going to get canceled.
I don't think we'll get canceled for talking about stuff that we don't know about. I mean, all the people in the media do that every day.
Never stops politicians, does it? No, okay.
That's for sure. So the biblical story, Adam and Eve, they're tempted to taste the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and then they're expulsed from the Garden of Eden. That's the idea of the knowledge of good and evil that you refer to. Is that right?
Yeah.
And if you eat the forbidden fruit, then you gain the awareness of morality, and that awareness of morality fundamentally changes the human condition or the human psyche. Is that right?
Ted, edit that out. Hey, you're not supposed to be divulging that type of editing secrets. Put yourself out of a job, sir. That's fine. Probably need to cut like all of that out. Let's just start over. Throw it in the bin. Start over. Okay, where were we before this Shanghai of crapology?
We were doing a quick review of the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Evil. Eating the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge caused Adam and Eve to gain an awareness of morality that fundamentally changed the human condition and human psychology.
Were they unaware of morality? What was the fruit itself? It's all just metaphor, right? Like what an actual tree and an actual fruit.
I don't know. You know, those are things you've discussed on the podcast before with Buck Johnson and Lunchbox. We haven't really talked about that.
Carl Jung says that it is important to understand the psychology of the Bible. Because if you don't understand the psychology of the Bible, you will never understand the psychology of the real world. So is the Bible a book about psychology?
I don't know that I would say it's a book about psychology, at least from my limited experience. I've never read the entire Bible, but I've read parts of the Bible, and I went to a Christian church for many years and experienced people telling me about the Bible a lot. And it seems to me the Bible is an attempt to capture stories about morality and present them in a way that involves characters that are relatable to people. But it depends on how you define psychology. I guess let's talk about how do we define psychology.
Well, psyche, soul, ology, knowledge. So, soul knowledge? That's not what we describe it as in, the modern day, but the etymology of the word comes from soul and knowledge, right?
The study of the soul, I mean, I guess it's typically thought of as the scientific study of the human mind and behavior. It's very broad. It includes examination of things like cognition and emotion, personality development, social interaction, and what might be considered abnormal behavior.
Well, that's another good question. Where do emotions come from? What are emotions?
What's the point of them? How do they benefit us as a species?
These are all good questions.
I think that they are somehow involved in the regulation of our reactions to the stimuli in our environment. From a purely sort of biological standpoint, I would say they're there to help us gauge how we should react to things. I think a lot of emotions probably stem from the most basic things like fear or anticipation, excitement, some sort of positive reinforcement response of happiness when we experience something that's good. But it's funny how our emotions are so tied to things like diet and sleep. If you don't get enough sleep or you don't eat the right foods, your emotional state can be completely whack. I experienced that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can't remember who said it. Was it Bill Lipton? They're doctors in this woo-hoo field of spirituality as a science.
Okay.
Thoughts are the language of the mind. Emotions are the language of the body. And since we're all just an energetic field, we're surrounded by, we're like little molecules, if you will, and our physical being is at the heart of the thing, and we're surrounded by toroidal field of energy that can be expanded up to 8 feet, maybe even further.
Right, yeah, I think that's Bill Lipton that you're talking about.
Yeah, Bill Lipton, that
The
was.
psychologist who wrote about the intersection of spirituality and science. And the core argument was that spirituality can and should be studied using the same rigorous empirical methods that are applied to other scientific disciplines. That sounds practical to me.
Yeah.
You believe that the spiritual experiences and phenomenon are just as real and measurable as physical phenomenon, and that they can be investigated and understood through scientific inquiry.
Yeah, we just need adequate machine to measure it.
So you were saying there's a field around you where there's a measurable impact of the spiritual experience or the psychological experience.
Mm-hmm. That feels like a big bubble, right? So everybody's got one. So that makes us all like little molecules in something much, much bigger. And that field is big when it's positively charged and smaller when it's negatively charged, because love and fear have two different frequencies. Let's just say it like that, I guess. That's the simplest thing. Love is much bigger and more expansive, and fear is smaller and more withdrawn.
In this analogy, would fear include hate or feelings of anger or sadness?
Yeah. Everything below 400, 500 in the frequency range.
We originally were talking about the knowledge of good and evil. I think the idea that love being bigger than negative feelings, if we're talking about love on the good end of that spectrum and fear on the evil end of that spectrum, I would think the idea would be that evil would be as impactful or as expansive as love, but the idea that it's on some sort of different frequency could imply that it has a different impact, because as we know, thinking about just energetic frequency, the ultraviolet end of the spectrum, things that have a higher frequency might have a greater impact over a shorter duration because the waves would hit you faster. That's an interesting idea, the idea that emotional context or morality context would fall somewhere upon the energetic spectrum and be measurable in that way. I know there's certainly the ability to measure the changes of emotion in people's brains through MRI detection and that sort of thing. I'm not sure if any of those studies that have sort of talked about mapping those to some sort of frequency range, how accurate or how repeatable those studies are up to this point. I don't know. Some of that seems to fall within that whole new agey spiritual woohoo level of integrity versus whatever you want to consider empirical science to be. But I think that's an interesting idea, that these fall on these different ends of the spectrum and that they might have different or greater levels of influence. Because I think there certainly is something to the impact of intention. If people have the intention to love, or they have the intention to pray for each other, or they have the intention to support one another if they have similar beliefs, I think you definitely see that in the real world, that there's an impact to that. I think that's how countries exist, don't you? Or how wars are fought. People get motivated by some sort of similar concept that they want to fight for or organize around, because it really just comes down to organization, doesn't it? I mean, I guess maybe that's the whole point of Christianity, to motivate people to organize around this idea of good and promote the idea of good over the idea of evil.
Yeah, I would guess that's it in a nutshell.
I mean, there could be a similar sort of anti-moral religious movement. I don't think there is one. I mean, people have talked about things like the Church of Satan or whatever, but that's not at all the same thing. Those seem to be motivated around selfish activity rather than some sort of group activity. I guess maybe organized crime or gangs might be an example of, but really those are just rebellions against somebody else's idea of what's right and wrong, right?
Possibly. Who has the right idea of what is right? I think you'll just know them inherently. Maybe. Wouldn't you know them inherently?
What's good and evil?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the assumption, right? But I guess you'd say like a drug cartel knows it's wrong or whatever, but they're just trying to get money.
Profit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything's just trying to profit. And more we're just pushing product. Products are being pushed upon us, whether they're legitimate products or not.
There is that kind of mentality of like, if you're the wolf in the land of the sheep and you can see that the sheep are just sheep, does that mean you're evil because you're the wolf and you exploit their weaknesses? Or does that just make you a stronger predator in the world of dog eat dog or whatever? And is it wrong to be a better predator, or is it in some way justifiable to be the better predator? Because, you know, if it's wrong to be the better predator, then we all have some reckoning to do when we look in the mirror.
Oh yeah, everybody. I really maintain that if you can't look in the mirror and see both Christ and the devil, you're not doing anything right. Because it all stems from the heart of man, whereas evil bred the hearts and minds of men. And the same idea works for the good too, you know.
Now we will take a break for some advertisements. Please support our sponsors. Just imagine this could be your advertisement. Please reach us at theBlindAlchemyPodcast@gmail.com to provide sponsorship. And now, back to the show.
Sit back, relax, take a deep breath, and when you feel it in your chest, exhale into the now moment and join me, the Blind Alchemist, as we conduct a little blind alchemy. You're either one or the other, because you sure as hell can't be both. And intention will line up with that. And you can set out to do the right things for all the wrong reasons, and you can set out to do the wrong thing for all the right reasons too.
Right.
And therein, like, how do you set up intentions? A lot of the manifestation stuff is like, clearly define what you want. Well, how do you fucking do that? How do you be so hyper specific? Because you don't know what the fuck you want, really. You just have a concept that I don't want what I have now. I want something better. What's that better thing look like? Well, it looks kind of like this. Maybe.
Right.
And then you look at it again and you're like, well, I don't really want that shit either. I want this better thing. So if your intention is ever evolving, how do you ever manifest anything?
It's the parable of the genie in the bottle. When you get your 3 wishes, you got to be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it.
Yep.
And once you get it, you might decide, oh, that's not what I intended to wish for or what I intended to manifest.
Right. So you have to be hyper specific with your words. Then that leads us into words cast spells, right?
Well, words do cast spells upon the person that thinks the words. So from what you said before, our brain cannot tell the difference between the story we're telling ourselves and the story that others are telling us. It all depends on how much faith you put into that story and the context in which that story is told to you, and the sort of respect that you have for the person that's telling the story.
Mm-hmm.
Self-esteem, I think, plays a lot into that, and self-pride. We were talking about how pride could be both a good and evil thing before.
So the more and more I look at all this stuff, it's all psychology. It's all some sort of mental manipulation, mental and emotional, because emotion is energy in motion, right? That's how they break that down, and Lipton and Strenza would break that down, energy in motion.
Emotion is energy in motion. What does that mean?
And energy is always in motion because, you know, the toroidal field never stops moving.
Yeah, nothing is not in motion. I don't think there's anything that's not in motion. I mean, at least that's what our understanding of the universe is. It seems like anything that you want to define, once you reach the upper or lower echelon of that definition, you know, the extremities of a concept, whenever you're at one extremity of the concept or another extremity of the concept, all things begin to break down. So ideas like good or evil, or ideas like nothingness or somethingness or existence or non-existence, matter, antimatter, you know, defining these key ideas, all definitions seem to break down the more specificity you imply.
We'll discuss that later.
Looks like you're excited about some idea here.
Something like 4 laws of the universe. And 1, 2, and 3 are concrete regardless. The fourth one is change. Everything changes except for the first three.
Oh, are you talking about Newton's laws of physics?
No, I'm not talking about fucking science. Fuck science. No, I'm just kidding. Fuck Newton. I'm bored. I'm going to make up calculus. Fuck you.
Well, the laws of thermodynamics are sort of like that. You know,
Well.
energy can be transformed from one form to another. Entropy of an isolated system not in equilibrium will always increase over time. As systems approach absolute zero, entropy approaches a constant or zero value. Or maybe you're talking about laws of motion, you know, object at rest will stay at rest, acceleration.
No, I'm not talking about laws of motion.
It's sort of like the idea of what you're talking about.
No, none of that. None of that. None of that. You know, I don't bother with those kinds of trifles.
With Newtonian physics?
Yeah, I don't believe in Newtonian physics.
Well, that's good, because neither does physics anymore.
You see? It's all bullshit.
For the most part. They came up with it in the 1700s, so it's been a long time since then. Everything's different now.
Yeah, that's the thing about science. It's ever evolving, ever expanding.
Yeah, that's the point of it.
It starts with an idea. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. We can make this all match this, but except for that anomaly over there and over there, then you dig a little deeper and like, oh, well, this isn't really an anomaly.
Yes.
It's something we didn't understand about previous shit.
All of science occurs in the anomalies. That is, I would say, the best definition of science other than, you know, the definition of the scientific method. But I have a core belief that all discoveries made in science are accidental and anomalous. And any scientist that says to you, I discovered this, is lying. They're essentially just saying, I was trying to disprove this theory and something strange happened. That's what I believe the true definition of discovery is.
I can't find it. Maybe I'll find it later.
That's all right. We were talking about psychology and sort of subconsciousness. What about subconsciousness versus consciousness and how that relates to the psyche or psychology and these ideas of the seed of the soul? If you're truly open to awareness, then you will perceive the truth, and the truth is good, as compared to the idea of if you're focused on your consciousness or your analytical mind, then you will be drawn into the trappings of evil or the trappings of the devil. Because it seems to me when it comes to psychology, there's this sort of idea that there's this part of the brain that works on the autonomic limbic system that is reactive to true objective reality. And then there's the part of psychology that's the analytical mind, which is reactive to what we imagine that story to be or that truth to be. Do you believe that there is truth in the subconscious, which is more or less true than the truth of knowledge or the analytical mind or wisdom or whatever you might call it?
Oh, yeah. Well, your brain works in three phases. You got your base mind, which is a reptilian mind, or reptile mind is what they refer to. You got your emotional mind and your rational mind. Now, your rational mind is the lying mind. That's the analytical mind, okay? It merely rationalizes any way it can to get what the reptile mind wants. That's pure and simple.
Yeah, or whatever it's motivated to believe in. You know, that's another one of my sort of core thoughts is that the human mind can rationalize anything.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
To suit its benefits. We can tell ourselves any sort of story to be the truth and believe in that truth. Is it possible that that story changes over time? I think it is. I think it does. I think it's fundamentally...
I would hope so. That's fundamental to growth, right? The story has to change or you will not grow. You'll just be... You have two growths. You grow better or bitter. And you don't want to be bitter. So you got to grow better. And then you got to figure out how to make yourself grow better. And that's going to take a whole lot of under the microscope, oh shit, I'm a piece of shit because I think like this or I do these things or... These are not beneficial to me, yet alone anybody the hell else around me because I'm doing this. So I'm the problem and I need to fix that.
So what about the idea of the subconscious being the source of self-reflection? It sounds like you're saying that the rational mind or the conscious mind is the source of that self-reflection. But we do ponder our own existence when we're not conscious of it, right? When we're just walking around the world our subconscious is always working on solving things, or maybe it's helping us remember something that we forgot, or maybe some people say that that's what dreaming is. It's some form of categorization of the thoughts and emotions of the day by the subconscious. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think the subconscious is that the gateway to truth?
Well, it may be the subconscious is much bigger than we give it credit for. You know, the conscious mind is going to tell you to raise your hand. That's what you do to wave your body parts around you. Your conscious mind says raise your arm raises, right? Your conscious mind does not tell your heart to beat. That's on autopilot. That's subconscious shit on the biological level. But is there more to that space? Because like I've said before, I believe the brain is an organ, the mind is a space. So that means the conscious mind is probably a smaller space than the subconscious mind, and it's much, much more expansive. You can go anywhere in the mind. There's no limits on where you can go. And as far as dreams and sleep, whatever realm we go to in sleep, I don't think it's a process. I think we literally go there.
Oh, really? So there's some physical transformation that occurs when you say we go there, or you can go anywhere you want in your mind. Is it a physical dimensional shift or a planar energetic shift?
Probably a planar energetic. Like, think of it like if your body's an avatar, you just turn this avatar off, go play another one.
Ah, interesting.
Just turn this game off, go play another one. And that's the bits and pieces that this avatar recalls because it's in sleep mode. So, you know, some of that shit's got to bleed through.
Is that closer to what you said as the reptilian brain or the emotional brain?
That's just part of the organs. You know what I mean?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So there's no truth to the reptilian brain or the emotional brain over the conscious brain, the lying brain.
I don't know.
I wonder about that because if you do submit to the concept that reptiles are somehow less emotionally complicated or less intellectually complicated or less analytically or wise, you know, or whatever the human rhetoric is that suggests, you know, the narcissistic human tendency to believe that we are the best and the most evolved and the greatest creatures on the planet or whatever.
Total horseshit.
If you come at it from that perspective and you think that fruit flies, which don't seem to have much cognizance at all, but they can track light and they can track the smell or some sort of chemoreceptive attraction to some sort of food that they like. You know, if all that's guiding them is that light and that attraction to that fruit that they want to eat, or that partner that they want to mate with or whatever, could it be true that they are living a truly good life? But if you back out of that perspective and try to apply that to the predator, is the lion evil for eating the lamb? Is the lamb good just because it's the one that's the victim? There seems to be this weird conflation of victimhood and the food chain with good versus the predator being evil. You see what I'm saying? Maybe that's just me and my morality that I was taught as a child, but it just seems like that's part of our nature, human societies. This idea in Christianity, especially of like turning the other cheek, which I'm fully on board with. I don't think you should be a victim to be good, but I do think it is disarming. That concept of Jesus saying, turn the other cheek to your enemy. If he strikes you, turn your other cheek to him and say, you can strike me here as well. That does seem like a good pacifist, disarming way to handle conflict if your goal is to avoid conflict.
Seems like a good way to get your ass kicked. Everybody says that about Jesus. Like, he said, turn the other cheek, but read a little further. He beat the shit out of a guy, right? Beat the shit out of a guy in a church for being wrong, for being a dick, for scamming motherfuckers out of money, right? He lectured them while making a cat o' nine tails, a whip, whatever you want to call it, and then proceeded to beat the shit out of the man. Drove him out. Drove him out means he beat the shit out of him. He didn't ask him to leave politely. He didn't let him slap him in the face and go, okay, you got to load now. He beat the hell out of that man until he left.
Is that your interpretation?
You know, that's part of the story that everybody ignores.
Is that your interpretation of the word drove? I mean, drove could be perceived a lot of different ways.
Yeah, he put him in the Prius and drove him out of Galilee. No.
Well, there exactly is my point. Language is complicated, and who knows what the word...
He would have not needed to weave a whip while lecturing the man before driving him out if he just said, hey, please leave. You see what I'm saying? Like, he flipped tables over and beat motherfuckers, okay? But it's there, you just gotta read it.
I'm not arguing whether or not that is the point of that tale, because I think, like we said, much of the Bible seems to be written as a morality tale to ascribe specific sentiment.
There is the language problem too, you know.
Yeah, right. Like the word that's translated as drive.
Because it's filtered through how many languages before it gets to now?
Exactly. That was what I was trying to say.
How many years?
If we use the word drove today, it means to drive a car because that's our most popular conception of that. But if we live in a time where cars don't exist, maybe it's referring to slapping a horse with a rein. Maybe it means slapping a camel with a rein. Or if we live in a time or in a place where there are no camels or horses, maybe it's a word that means something completely different. Or maybe that's just the King James interpretation.
Now we will take a break for some advertisements. Please support our sponsors. Just imagine this could be your advertisement. Please reach us at TheBlindAlchemyPodcast@gmail.com to provide sponsorship. And now, back to the show.
It's a bit like it is easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven, right? That's not an actual needle as we think of. The eye of the needle is walled cities had big doors, and they had smaller doors than the big doors. That's the eye of the needle.
Ah, interesting.
A camel will fit through that, barely, if he's not overpacked. A camel will get through that, because it's just big enough for you and the horse you rode in on, so to speak.
So there's some sort of a literal way to perceive that, different than the metaphorical way of perceiving it as something large going through something small. Okay, so what about this idea that there's danger in the knowledge of morality? So it's some form of punishment to Adam and Eve that they become aware of this knowledge. God is punishing them by giving them this awareness of morality because she disobeyed him and ate from the tree of knowledge or whatever.
Right.
So she receives this punishment for being persuaded by the evil one. This implies that, I would say, punishment is good or righteous, right? If God is I guess God is the source of all good and evil. So God can get away with being good and evil, and man is not allowed to be evil. How does that work again? If you're evil, you don't get to go to heaven because you're evil?
Maybe it's just neither good nor evil. There just is what is, and our perception of it is good or evil.
Yeah.
How we perceive it. Because Nathan French suggests the term, the knowledge of good and evil, may mean the knowledge of administering reward and punishment.
Yeah, okay, so that's an interesting concept. Maybe before that, it was all rewards from God. God made the earth and made the animals and made all the things for Adam to enjoy, and then when Adam got sad and lonely, he made him a helpmate to come and be his mate. I don't know. So then it's time to learn about punishment because you did the thing that you weren't supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so therefore you now have the knowledge of punishment and reward. Is that the idea of this Nathan French guy?
Yeah, I think so.
What are your thoughts on that?
That seems to make a little more sense. I'm not saying there isn't good or evil, because you have definitely seen good and you've definitely seen evil. I think everybody has, as we understand things. And our understanding is quite possibly dead wrong in the first place about a lot of things.
Sure, but like you said, we all believe in this concept of there are good things and there are bad things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are rewards when we do things that are right. At least that's what our parents try to teach us. If we do the right thing, then we'll be rewarded with pride or with self-esteem or with a sense of meaning or a sense of purpose, or we'll be rewarded with presents or candy or permission to do the things that we're wanting to do. And if we do the wrong thing, then punishment is going to leave us with this idea of guiltiness or shame or inner conflict. There's also corporal punishment, right? Is God talking about corporal punishment or violence? I mean, again, there's this concept that hurting the one that you love is evil. That seems to be part of this concept of morality, right? War is not always evil, but if you war upon the ones that you love, then that's especially evil, unless you're trying to teach them some other part of morality. Like, it's okay to beat your children if you're trying to teach them not to steal from you, but it's not okay to beat your children if they do the thing you ask them to do.
Just because you feel like beating them.
Yeah. So how does that, how does that work?
How does any of it work, man?
I don't know.
That's why we're here, right?
Because I've always taken it too literally. When I was a kid, if I was involved in a situation where I had done what was right or what was wrong, generally my first question was, why? Why is this wrong? And then my second question would be like, why am I being punished for this if I didn't know that it was wrong? Or how come you can't see it from my perspective? But I do think that punishment is definitely something that's a useful tool and necessary for parental guidance to get the children to behave correctly. And I do think that there's generally a good way to behave. Society, I do believe, would be more chaotic if we didn't have rules to follow.
Someone once told me that life has rules. And I was like, no, life has one rule. That's live at all cost. Society has rules. You know what else has rules? Prison. Is society a prison? Is the earth a prison? Is the physical dimension a prison?
I would say that from all these different perspectives, prison is the story that you tell yourself. I was watching a silly cop show that was made back in the first decade of the 2000s, and there was an episode where they thought it was going to be a very poignant and deep thing. This guy had done his own version of the Stanford prison experiment. And even though he didn't lock any of the doors, the students who were involved in the study, the ones that were guards acted like guards, and the ones that were prisoners acted like prisoners. And even when the guards began to abuse the prisoners, which is basically the point of that study, is to show that power corrupts. Even when the prisoners were abused and they could leave whenever they wanted because the door wasn't locked, because they had accepted the story that they were prisoners, they stayed and remained prisoners, and they were further abused.
Well, they didn't know the doors were locked, right? That's part of the experiment.
Well, I don't know. They don't explicitly say that, whether or not he told them the doors were locked or not, but you do see this in reality. You know, it's like the old idea of the circus elephant. When a circus elephant is a baby, you tie it up with a rope that's strong enough to hold the baby, and when it grows up and it weighs 2,000 pounds and it could easily break the rope, it doesn't pull on the rope. And same thing with electrical fences around your cattle. You know, if you have electric fences around your cattle, they're not going to try to break through the fence, even though they could easily just get shocked for a second and break the fence and run away because they weigh way more than the fence can hold back. So there is this idea that prison is within the mind, and this idea of whether or not the earth is a prison or society a prison, I would submit to you that if you believe society is a prison, then society can be a prison for you. If you believe that the earth is your prison, then the earth can seem like a prison to you. Isn't that the point of trying to reach this higher plane? To stop telling yourself that the world is a prison, to start telling yourself the benefits of the world so that you can see it as not a prison.
Yeah. I think that all of mankind now is in desperate need of some sort of healing. And that healing, which I think we may be very well in the process of doing, is going to destroy the social and economic norms that we have now. What's going to happen then? What's going to be next? Are they just going to build a better fence? The powers that be are not going to let us roam free, is my point, because they must control us. That's their whole goal.
That is their own prison that they tell themselves that they live in if they believe that they are in power. Anyone who believes that they have power over anyone else, unless they have some sort of weapon or physically enforce that power, I would argue that they do truly not have that power over other people. We as people all have that power to believe that story ourselves, whatever that story is. If we believe that we are slaves to society or slaves to our jobs, or that we are being controlled by those who pretend to control us, I mean, it's sort of like the whole idea of the American dream, right? At least the propaganda that the forefathers of this country would like to persuade you to believe in, is that this is a country where you can go and live out the dreams that you have, whether those be religious or those be dreams of building your own fortune, or those be dreams of having a family without the rules of dictatorship, which I guess is what truly the concept of freedom is. It's the freedom from not having a monarch, which you're saying that that freedom isn't truly free from a different perspective.
It's just a different king.
Well, this concept that there's this democratic representation of the people that they can have a part in to set those rules. But then again, you know, there are people that break the rules every day. There are career criminals who just say, fuck the police, I'm not going to do what it is that you tell me I can't do. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And there's the argument, are those people more free than the people that celebrate those rules? I don't know. I think in some ways the rules make you free because they give you guidelines to work from. But at the same time, I believe that the rules will sort themselves out. I don't think that man will choose to exist in a way where he does not have rules. I'm pro-anarchy because I believe entropy will lead to rules. The natural state of our consciousness and our psyche will lead us to at least follow people that we believe will protect us. But at the same time, those people that are put in those positions are often corrupted. And I think that's also fundamental.
Yeah, they're often corrupt psychopaths. So that's not the kind of leadership we need at all. But does the position of authority cause the corruption? Does the position of authority cause the corrupt individual to become a psychopath, or are they a psychopath first?
I think it's much more basal. I could be wrong about this, and this may be like old psychology theory, but I think it all has to do with our initial, when we learned this idea of crime and punishment, this idea of punishment and reward as children, I think that greatly affects how we respond to that in the future. And if you're a person who's rewarded for bad behavior or selfish, greedy behavior, or you see rewards in your life through the gains that you've had, like if you steal something when you're little and you get away with it and there's no consequences for that, then I think that can have a permanent effect on your psychology and how you see those choices in your life. If you have good parents that catch you doing wrong and they make you go back to the candy store and give back the candy and apologize to the person and then explain to you that this is his livelihood, now he makes his money, and if we don't support him to make money, then his life's gonna suck, and you have some rich emotional response to that that's supportive, I think you can learn good lessons from that and not react that way in the future. Well, I think our leaders who are highly corrupt criminals are kind of like little kids that are just trying to steal candy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People that want more and more money is like candy to them or whatever because they have some sort of dopamine response to it. But I think that's different than psychopaths. I think psychopaths, there might be something else going on there where it's not that higher reward system that's coming into play. I think psychologists might say that a psychopath, a true psychopath, maybe is missing some part of that morality spectrum where they may not even be able to register these concepts of good or evil. They can see that other people talk about that, but I don't think they really feel guilt or shame. I don't think that's part of their psychology. Or maybe it's an increased part of their psychology where all they do is feel shame and they're obsessed with that, and so they're compelled by those obsessions to do things. I think it falls on either ends of that spectrum. I could be wrong in that, though. What do you think about these corrupt politicians? Is it a problem with their ability to recognize reward and punishment?
I don't know. I think that they believe that money is power because you can buy your way out of every goddamn thing if you've got enough money. And then you have no punishment if you can buy your way out of it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't really know. I don't know that I actually know any psychopaths. Probably a good thing. Maybe.
Well, me.
You're not a psychopath. Are you a psychopath?
Just kidding. You were talking about this idea of if the whole pyramid falls and society experiences this healing that you suggested that we're about to experience, if it's a healing and our concept that healing is a good thing, then maybe it's not such a bad thing if we lose this pyramid of rules or economy or whatever it is that's led us down this evil path.
I'm not saying there doesn't have to be any rules, because that seems chaotic, but a new set of rules, a set of better rules, perhaps.
Learning from past mistakes.
Yeah. But I think it's going to take, I don't know, it could happen overnight. Doubtful. It'd have to take a huge shift in consciousness for mankind to change that fast overnight. But you can slowly see a gradual steering towards something better. And I think the old guard is fighting like hell to keep it where it is, because if they're not in control, what's next for them? They've lost everything, and then, well, who knows?
Now we will take a break for some advertisements. Please support our sponsors. Just imagine this could be your advertisement. Please reach us at TheBlindAlchemyPodcast at gmail.com to provide sponsorship. And now, back to the show.
Was there a time in the past where man had a better set of rules?
Probably prehistory, in the last age. The Bible will talk about earth ages and heaven ages, and there's 3 of them. And doesn't give specifics on them really, but technically I think we may actually be in the 3rd one or beginning the 3rd one because of this shift going forward. In Genesis, where it says the world became void and without form, and what that really means in the Hebrew, which I can't tell you the exact Hebrew words, but became, that means there was something before and it got destroyed and it started over. Okay, that's 1. Then you can read a little further in Genesis, and then there's that flood thing. That's 2. So this makes us the 3rd, right?
I guess based on this rationality, yes.
The flood may not be the causation of a new age, but it certainly seems like with the destruction of something, something new comes. That's a logical leap, right?
Yeah, I mean, wasn't that the point of the flood as told through the eyes of Noah, is that God came to him and said, hey, man's been doing the wrong thing, so we're just going to wipe those dudes out, and then there's going to be new men, and then they'll come up with a different set of things. Wasn't that the point of the flood, to kind of get rid of the old guard?
Yeah, kind of. It was to destroy off all these nephilims and these angel-human hybrid kind of deals. And if that's the case, it didn't work at all. Because you read a little bit further, well, look, there's some more giants. Giants are the nephilims, the angel-human hybrids. Yeah, well, there's one, and there's some more over there. There's a whole continent or country full of giants over there that Moses didn't get to go see. So it didn't work. And then you've got literally where they find giant bones, carcasses all the time, and you've got all the stories coming out of like Afghanistan where the military ran into some giants and basically got their ass handed to them, where there's legitimacy to these things at all. I mean, I watched a video of a guy who allegedly worked at the Smithsonian, and he was like, yeah, we get fucking giant bones all the time. Like huge fucking bones, and they're not dinosaurs.
Huh.
Which leads me to another thing. How do they keep finding dinosaurs with flesh on them if they're billions of years old? Question mark.
I haven't seen anything about them finding dinosaurs with flesh on them.
Oh, yeah. I saw where they found a fucking dragon with wings and everything.
What was that source? I haven't heard about this when we found a dragon.
I don't know. It was not in English. I don't know what fucking language that was. I was like, I don't understand anything that's going on, but that is most certainly a dragon. It's got wings. Certainly looks like the dragons that they talk about in the myths. Where did the dragons go?
I don't know. I always thought that the dragon was one of these ideas like the mermaid or the minotaur or the yeti or the Sasquatch. These sort of mythical creatures that have always existed throughout time. But then again, like you said, it all comes down to the etymology. Because if you follow back to the idea of the dragon, when that word was introduced, it came from a region in which that word, I think, originally just meant serpent. So it was just like a different name for a different species of a similar animal that existed in other places. But I could be conflating two different ideas of dragon from two different societies, because there is the idea of dragons that are giant, reptilian, dinosaur-like creature.
Drakon, Greek, serpent, Drakon. It holds Drakon and into Latin, and then it goes into Old French, and then it becomes dragon in Middle English.
But there's also the concept of the dragon from the Eastern civilizations, like ancient China and stuff. They had some concept of dragons as well, which was different than that idea of the serpent.
Those appear to be closer to the serpent because they're really stupid long.
Yes. The idea of an Eastern dragon versus a Nordic dragon or a Western dragon. The cool looking dragons that I like the Western dragon.
Yeah, the Tolkien dragons.
The idea that it's sort of like a giant lizard with wings that can fly and also has horns on its head or something like that.
Wouldn't that be a pterodactyl?
It's sort of like a triceratops with a pterodactyl's wings is like the kind of dragon that I like the idea of.
That's the ones I like the most. The cool kind you can ride and spit fire.
The problem with all of these conceptions of dragons, a biologist will tell you, is the wing size of the dragon. In order for the dragon to be as big as the dragon is thought to be, would have to be enormous, like the size of a bat's wing to the bat's body. So a dragon that weighed as much as 5 elephants or whatever would have to have wings as big as a 737. You know, it would have to be absolutely massive.
Yeah, it'd be kind of hard to hide those in plain sight, right?
Yeah, and they'd have to be able to flap fast enough to keep the dragon aloft. And that's one thing that I've never heard scientists be able to explain, this idea that pterodactyls could fly. I don't really think that pterodactyls flew like we think of flying, like a bat flying. I think it's much more likely that they were like big gliding squirrels that could jump off of a high point and float down to where it was trying to go. But I don't think they could like flap their wings and fly because they would weigh too much. Their wings weren't big enough to be able to sustain their loft because they were massive.
Well, we're talking about a completely different ecosystem then, too.
True, and a completely different atmosphere.
Yeah.
And who knows what we think of as time and carbon dating. We all think that that's accurate, but there's no proof that dinosaurs were around.
There's no proof of science whatsoever. It's just speculation.
Yeah, right. We think that happened about 250 million years ago. And first of all, 250 million years? Can anyone even conceptualize what 250 million years is? No, that's a length of time that no one will ever understand. But
it's so big that you can't understand it, so you don't fucking question it and you'll buy it.
And if you made a small rounding error, could that really have been 250
weeks ago?
Billion years.
Weeks ago.
Yeah, completely possible that it was way longer ago, and maybe it was before the moon separated from the Earth, and there was a completely different gravity, and everything was completely different then. I mean, we really have no way of knowing, but I would assume that we're closer than we're off on that conception, but that, of course, is all relative, right?
Right. They find fossils of things eating things and giving birth.
Yes.
So that implies a very quick stop of something.
That's why we like this theory of the meteor striking and it causing this massive mudslide, to explain how things could stop suddenly.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Because it's convenient based on, what we currently have experience or history of. We're straying off the concept of good and evil. I'm not sure that dinosaurs have a concept of good and evil.
Well, we never nail anything down here. We just walk around in circles and be like, yeah, we did nothing, but we did something, hopefully. I think the point is that we're even talking in the first place. I think that matters more than whether or not we make a fucking point. Patricia, make a note. Those fabulous folks over at HairelineProductions, who take care of all our editing needs here on the Blind Alchemy Podcast. And sometimes they get it right, and I'm proud of them. I thank them for doing it pro bono. And, I got to send them a basket. I don't know what kind of basket he would like. Did he not eat the pineapple one? He doesn't like pineapple. Avocados, then? Well, he's a weird guy. Put passion fruit in there. Maybe that'll make him happy. Hell, put a dragon in there. He might like that. or a rabbit. You don't think that's the kind of hair? I think that's what that means, hairline, because he's fast at editing. Or they are. For sure. I don't know. Well, we'll work it out. Staff meeting later, guys.
Well, who wouldn't want a basket of dragons?
John Buckson would like a basket of dragons. Please put that down. I wouldn't. I mean, my God, they're going to eat you out of house and home. You know how big they get? You got nowhere to put them. It's not like he's staying in the garage. It's not going to keep to the carport. You know what I mean?
I was just interested in the absolute size of a basket that would hold multiple dragons. That's more what I was going for. The dragons, they can do whatever they want.
I was thinking baby dragons, so they wouldn't be very big, you know?
Oh, okay.
There'd be a knock on your door. Excuse me, sir.
That's probably a more convenient gift.
Your dragon stole my Volkswagen again. Yeah, I'm sorry. Just that.
Did you want to talk about yetzerhara?
I guess we could talk about the yetzerhara thing.
Yetzerhara, concept in Judaism that refers to the human inclination towards evil or selfish desires.
What was the other one?
It's often contrasted with the yetzerhatov, which is basically the opposite inclination towards good. So it's sort of like the age-old question of, is man at its core good or evil?
A man is whatever is at his core.
So you say it's relative to the man.
Yeah, it's either. It has to be. Or both simultaneously.
Yeah.
What is that? Two wolves? You know, you have the black wolf and the white wolf. Whichever one grows stronger is the one you feed the most. Yin and yang, the white and black fish. There has to be a balance, right?
I don't know. I believe that it is relative and subjective, as are the concepts of good and evil. It depends to me strongly on this concept of man is a social creature, and part of our biological inclination to survive is to live in a society and support that society. We are herd animals, and we succeed from being in a herd. You put a man out by himself against the wild, he may last a while, but he's not going to last nearly as long as you put a village out against the wild. And feeding from that position, I think that's where this concept of good and evil comes from. The idea of supporting the herd or supporting your society is good, versus the idea of supporting yourself is selfish or evil. But children are selfish, and they're inherently selfish, and I think that that's equally a survival mechanism. When you're a baby and you cannot survive if you don't eat enough food, it behooves you to be selfish and try to eat all the food you can get. A baby will do whatever is selfish without considering the adults. I think that we have this concept in our modern society that it's a sign of maturity when you grow up and you learn the difference between good and evil. And you learn that it's good to be good to other people versus it is bad to be only good towards yourself. Yet, you know, American society is kind of mixed up because we do greatly reward selfishness that's kind of built into our society. We have these mixed concepts of the fundamental good, but it's not always good. It's still subjective. So that is an interesting conundrum for me. And that's probably why we're discussing it today, because these things bounce off of each other. It's not easy.
They're certainly fluid, aren't they? Or appear to be fluid.
Yeah. Would a child who was constantly given anything that it desired or able to get away with breaking the rules to do whatever it wanted ever come to the idea of goodness? I think that's what this concept of yetzerhara versus yetzerhatov is trying to answer.
Or what his concept of goodness would be getting what he wanted, right?
Well, to him, but to everyone else, that would not be good, because then you'd be Donald Trump. If you have consequences for your behavior, then society is going to teach you that that is wrong. It's wrong to constantly just get all the chocolate that you want, but the child doesn't know better. The child's always going to go and eat all the chocolate it can get. But I do think that there is an internal reward system. Our digestive system has its own. Because if you party all the time or you eat chocolate all the time, you're not going to feel good. You're going to feel bad.
Definitely going to get a bit tummy ache, aren't you?
Yeah. So there is an internal system of reward and punishment that sort of teaches you.
So that's when you learn moderation, right?
I don't know. I mean, I think you learn it from many sources.
And what's the difference in medicine and poison? The dosage.
The dosage, right. And so that's why I think this idea of there being a fundamental good or a fundamental evil that's built into man's nature, I think it's pedantic and too simple. It's like a nursery rhyme versus reality. It's way too simple. The answer is it's complicated. We're both good and evil at all points in time. I don't know if I even truly believe in this concept of good or evil objectively from the perspective of outside the concepts of society, right? It's defined within this concept of society because, we think it's good to kill all the grasshoppers because we want to grow soybeans or whatever. But that's not good to the grasshoppers.
Yeah, so it's the bee argument or the frog argument. We kill off all the bees and the frogs were fucked because they can't play their role in maintaining the ecosystem, and then we'll definitely lose from that. So let your flowers grow. Let the bees feed.
Now we will take a break for some advertisements. Please support our sponsors.
We ain't got no sponsors. What you talking about? This whole damn podcast is brought to you by me because I'm the fucking sponsor here.
And now, back to the show.
Definitely help out the pollinators. The concept of something being purely anything seems a bit too simplistic to me, and it's this sort of morality tale that's used to help train society to work together. This concept of yetzerhara, yetzerhatov, I think it's a thing that you tell the kids. It's like the idea of heaven and hell. It's a thing you tell the kids to get them to walk in line so that they can later come to a point in their life that they understand that walking in line is beneficial to the rest of us. But I don't know. That's my perspective on it. What's your perspective on it? Do you think that we're inherently good or evil, or that there can be a true answer to that question?
I think it's all about choice. I think you choose to be one or the other, and at times you have to choose evil to do good or good to do evil.
What's an example of that? Les Miserables?
Kill the one to save a million. That's the best analogy I got right now.
Okay.
If you don't get this dude who's stuck on a train tracks off of it, you're going to kill all the cats on the train. So you either let the train hit that guy and not derail, or not do it. Or I hate the concept of the greater good, because those that are usually spewing about the greater good have not got good in mind at all. It's benefiting their pockets.
There is why we have this concept of the good and evil inherently. If you step back and you see people playing the ruse card or pretending to be green energy or clean coal or these kind of fucked up...
Did you say clean coal? That's a non-thing. That's like vegan leather.
That's exactly what I'm saying. When you have these people who pretend to be doing something good to fool people to do something else, so much of that happens. And so some would argue that the fact that those ruses exist points to the truth that man is inherently evil or inherently corrupt or inherently greedy or something like that.
Mm-hmm. That's the number of man, right? 6. 6 is corruptible. I don't understand how to explain that to you.
7, 8, 9. Isn't it that simple?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it is. But, the number of man is 6, and 6 is corruptible.
God is 7.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if God is 7 or not, but 7 is like whole, completed.
Yeah, isn't that the Pixies song? If man is 6 and God is 7.
Yeah.
Who is 8?
Numerology. What is it? Everything is nothing with a twist?
I don't know.
0 and 8. Biblical number meanings.
I don't know.
How they apply today.
Next time.
Put that on the back burner, Ted. Man, we really talk about some heavy stuff, don't we?
Yeah, we talked about good and evil from the biblical standpoint of the tree of knowledge. We talked about good and evil from the morality standpoint. We talked about good and evil from the perspective of inherentness and the human condition.
To sum up, we have no idea what the knowledge of good and evil are. Were we not supposed to know good and evil?
From Adam and Eve's perspective?
Yeah, before the fruit was eaten, whatever the fruit is or is not, were we not supposed to know?
That seems to be the concept.
Why is knowing bad? Is knowledge bad? Is knowledge evil?
That's always been my question, too. Why give this test to the people in the first place? And then why have a consequence from which you can never be absolved? And then the concept of Jesus has come to forgive us our sins. If our original sin is the knowledge of good and evil, then are we now forgiven for that original sin and no longer damned to the knowledge of good and evil? But it seems like we still have that debate, so we are still damned to that knowledge, and we still can do wrong and then go to hell. It all broke down with me there when I started to question those things. Doesn't seem like this is logical, but I don't suppose logic really has to have anything to do with it.
Maybe not.
But if we weren't supposed to know good and evil, then would we continue to live like it appears that the other animals live to us? Did we eat animals before we ate of the tree of knowledge? Did we have to eat at all? Did we have to have sex to reproduce? Did we have to do any of the things that we think of as carnal?
I don't know. I wasn't there. I wasn't even invited to the discussion. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody cared about my opinion at the time. These are all good questions. See, like I said earlier, you ask questions expecting answers, and all it really leads to is more questions. Do the questions gain us understanding? That's my whole point here. I'm trying to understand this stuff so that I can be a better me, to do better, to maybe influence the world in a better way. Or should I even worry about the world? Should I just make sure that I'm better and let the chips fall where they may?
Well, some say the best leader is the one who leads by example. So if you lead by doing better, then maybe your scope is limited in who you affect, but those who you affect will at least see you doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And they will want to do well as well if they believe that that is good.
Well, thank you for joining me here today, John Buckson, as we ask questions that have no answers and just get more questions. I thank you for your time. Your company are always a hoot.
It's always a pleasure to join you.
Yeah.
Can I ask you one final question?
Maybe.
It seems like you feel better now. Is that true?
Yeah.
Good.
I got frustrated earlier. I don't know what the hell that was about. I'm weird like that.
Maybe you needed to podcast.
When I feel constricted, and I always feel constricted, I get frustrated. So I am literally in a perpetual state of frustration. It's just being like, okay, this is manageable frustration.
Right.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does.
So I'm trying to break the constriction, and I have no idea how. I mean, it does help when we sit and we talk about these things, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the fact that some questions have no fucking answers is even more frustrating than asking or not understanding the question in the first place.
Sure.
The Bible says lean not on your own understanding, and I don't understand that. Whose understanding am I fucking supposed to lean on if I don't understand something? That's the whole rip of faith right there. You just have to have faith, it works out. You don't have to understand. No, that seems like a bumbling idiot kind of thing. I am just going to bumble through and not really understand anything and not care, and it would be fine.
It seems like maybe the message there is more about you can learn from others, from their experiences, as well as your own.
Maybe.
So ask a wise man who has fallen down where to step so that you do not fall in the same hole.
Yeah.
But know that falling in that hole also gives you a valuable lesson from which you may teach another.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we'll figure it out in the end. Most certainly at the end, anyway.
Hey, the joys in finding the new questions sometimes.
Right. All questions will be answered at the end of the ride. And you probably won't like some of them, but there you have it. Only the dead know, and they're not talking. But anyway, thank you for being here, John Buckson.
Thanks for having me. I had a great time.
Yeah, thank you. And everyone out there in the podcast land, thank you for joining us. We're glad that you listened to an hour or so with us.
Love you, ladies and gentlemen.
Hopefully you got a chuckle. Maybe you're one of those people that are thinking like we think and asking questions. If you got questions that you want to ask us, drop us a line. Ted, what's the email?
TheBlindAlchemyPodcast@gmail.com.
That's right.
Please hit us up on every social platform you can find.
Where can you find us?
On YouTube and Facebook.
Yeah, there you go. YouTube, Facebook. You can find us there. You can find us on Spotify, iTunes. We're everywhere. We're gaining ground, baby. We're getting bigger. Thank you for letting us dig into your ears. Thank you for being here with us.
I'm your host, your guest on the quest as we float through the sea of frequency that we call reality. Be safe out there. Come back and talk to me.
We would love to receive your feedback and your questions for advice. Please email us or send us a voicemail. Our address is theblindalchemypodcast@gmail.com. Find, like, review, subscribe, and contact us on Facebook and YouTube at The Blind Alchemy Podcast. All one word. Please subscribe to this podcast on your podcast player. We are available on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and anchor.fm/TheBlindAlchemyPodcast. Please tell all your friends, enemies, and any strangers to listen to our podcast. This will help us bring joy to everyone. Text-to-speech services were provided by freetts.com and readloud.net. Some information was provided by wikipedia.org. Various audio clips were located on youtube.com. Please see the episode notes for full attribution. We would like to extend a special thank you to the world's greatest musicians, sound designers, and engineers at HairelineProductions for their help with the composition, performance, editing, production, and recording of both the original music and today's show. Please like their content on SoundCloud/HairelineProductions.